What if the most disturbing thing about Annihilation isn't what you see on screen, but the fact that no one involved in making it fully understood what they were creating? This isn't just another sci-fi breakdown, and it's definitely not one of those ending explained videos that tries to neatly package everything into a clean answer. Because the truth is, this film resists that. It slips through interpretation. It mutates every time you try to define it. And that's not an accident. That's the design. When Alex Garland set out to adapt the novel, he made a decision that sounds almost absurd for a filmmaker. He didn't go back to the source material for accuracy. Instead, he relied on memory, on fragments, impressions, feelings that lingered after reading it once. What came out of that process wasn't a faithful adaptation. It was something far more unsettling. A cinematic hallucination shaped by emotion rather than logic. And you can feel that from the very first frame. There's a quiet unease beneath everything. The kind that doesn't scream at you, doesn't rely on jump scares or cheap horror tricks, but slowly wraps itself around your perception. This is psychological horror, disguised as science fiction, cosmic dread, hidden inside a story about exploration. The shimmer isn't just a place, it's a breakdown of reality itself, where identity, biology, and memory begin to blur. But here's where it gets even more unsettling. That same ambiguity didn't just exist in the script. It followed the cast and crew onto the set. The actors weren't always given full explanations. Motivations were intentionally left unclear. Scenes were performed in a kind of controlled confusion, where even the people inside the story didn't fully understand the rules of the world they were inhabiting. Think about that for a second. You're an actor, trained to build a character through intention, through clarity, and suddenly you're placed in an environment where clarity doesn't exist, where the emotional tone matters more than the narrative logic, where the fear you're expressing isn't always tied to something you can define. That kind of approach does something strange. It changes the way performances emerge. It creates reactions that feel less like acting and more like genuine disorientation. And when that energy starts to build across an entire cast, across weeks of filming, something shifts. The line between performance and experience starts to blur, just like it does inside the film itself. And that's exactly what makes Annihilation so different from anything else in the sci-fi horror space. It doesn't guide you. It doesn't comfort you. It doesn't even try to be understood in the traditional sense. Instead, it pulls you into a state of uncertainty and asks you to sit there, to feel it, to question what you're seeing, and more importantly, what it's doing to you. Because beneath the visuals, beneath the symbolism, beneath the eerie beauty of it all, there's a deeper layer that most people never even think about: the human cost of creating something like this. What it does to the people inside it. How it changes the way they see the story. And maybe even themselves. And once you start looking at the film through that lens, the behind-the-scenes story becomes just as unsettling as anything that made it into the final cut. Asterisk, because at some point, this stops being just about a film and starts becoming something personal. So before we go deeper into this, and trust me, it only gets stranger from here, take a second and ask yourself, have you ever watched something that didn't just entertain you, but unsettled you in a way you couldn't explain? Something that stayed in your mind, not because you understood it, but because you felt it? If that kind of story pulls you in, then this is exactly the kind of journey you don't want to miss. Leaving a like on this video might seem simple, but it tells the algorithm to push this kind of deeper, more psychological content to more people who are tired of surface-level explanations. And if you've ever had an experience like that, where a movie, a scene, or even a single image got under your skin, drop a comment below and share it. I read those, and they often shape what comes next on this channel. And if you're new here, this is what we do on Shadow Reel. We don't just talk about films. We dissect them, we step inside them, and sometimes we uncover things that were never meant to be fully understood. So if that resonates with you, consider subscribing, because the deeper we go into this story, the more it starts to reveal Dot and what happened during the making of Annihilation might be one of the clearest examples of that. Asterisk, and this is where things start to shift in a way most people don't expect. Because when you look at Annihilation through a traditional lens, plot, structure, explanation, it feels incomplete, almost like something is missing. But what if that absence is exactly the point? When Alex Garland began writing the script, he wasn't trying to build a clean, logical sci-fi narrative. He was chasing a feeling, the kind of feeling that lingers after a dream you can't fully remember, where fragments make sense emotionally, but collapse the moment you try to explain them. Instead of revisiting the book for accuracy, he trusted his memory, and memory is never precise. It distorts, it reshapes, it blends images and meanings. And that decision changed everything, because what emerged wasn't an adaptation in the conventional sense. It was something more abstract, more psychological, almost like the film itself had already been refracted before it even existed. And that idea, refraction, mutation, transformation, became the DNA of the entire project. Not just in the story, but in the way it was created. Think about how unusual that is. In most productions, clarity is everything. Scripts are refined, motivations are explained, every scene has a defined purpose. But here, ambiguity wasn't a problem to solve, it was a tool. The narrative doesn't guide you. It disorients you. It places you inside uncertainty and asks you to exist there without comfort. That's why so many viewers walk away searching for meaning, trying to decode symbols, building theories to make sense of it all. But the unsettling part is this: the film wasn't hiding answers. It was operating on a completely different language. One built on mood, on subconscious imagery, on emotional resonance, rather than intellectual resolution. And once you realize that, something clicks, but at the same time, something else slips away. Because now you're not just watching a story unfold, you're experiencing something that doesn't want to be pinned down. And that tension between the need to understand and the impossibility of doing so is what pulls you deeper. It's what keeps the film alive in your mind long after it ends. Not because it gave you answers, but because it left something open, something unresolved, something that keeps echoing. So as you're listening to this, I want you to hold on to that feeling. That moment where something doesn't quite make sense, but still affects you. If you've ever experienced that with a film, you can even drop a single word in the comments. Unexplainable, because that's the space we're stepping into here. And the deeper you look into how this film was conceived, the more it starts to feel like that lack of clarity wasn't just an artistic choice. It was the beginning of something that would slowly extend beyond the script itself and into everything that came after. And this is where the line between creation and experience begins to dissolve in a way that's honestly hard to ignore. Because once that fragmented, almost dreamlike script left the page and entered the real world of production, it didn't suddenly become clearer. It became even more disorienting. Imagine stepping onto a set where the rules of the story aren't fully explained to you, where your characters' motivations exist more as feelings than defined objectives. That was the environment surrounding the cast of Annihilation. Actresses like Natalie, Portman, and Tessa Thompson weren't just preparing for a typical sci-fi role, they were being placed inside a psychological space that mirrored the very confusion their characters were supposed to feel. And that wasn't accidental. Alex Garland deliberately avoided over-explaining the narrative. Scenes were often approached with minimal context, forcing the actors to react instinctively rather than analytically. In most films, that would be considered risky, even chaotic. But here, it created something rare, performances that feel less like constructed acting and more like genuine psychological exposure. Because when you remove certainty, something primal takes over. The need to understand gets replaced by the need to feel. And over time, that kind of environment starts to affect people in subtle ways. Long shoots inside isolated, unnatural landscapes. Repeated exposure to themes of identity breakdown, mutation, self-destruction. It's not just a story anymore. It becomes an atmosphere. You're living inside? There's a reason why so. Many behind-the-scenes accounts describe the filming process as strangely immersive. Not in a fun, adventurous sense, but in a quiet, almost invasive way. The kind that lingers after the cameras stop rolling. The kind that makes it harder to separate where the character ends and the person begins. And then there are moments that push that discomfort even further. The infamous bear scene, for example, isn't just disturbing because of what you see. It's disturbing because of what you hear. That distorted, almost human scream embedded in something animalistic. It hits a part of the brain that doesn't process it as fiction right away. And reactions on set reflected that. There was a level of unease that didn't need to be acted. This is where psychological horror and cosmic horror start to overlap in a very real way. Not just for the audience, but for the people creating it. Because the core idea of the film, the loss of identity, the blending of forms, the slow erasure of what makes you, you, isn't something you can fully simulate without, at least for a moment, letting it pass through you. And maybe that's why everything feels so authentic. Because instead of building fear from external threats, the film pulls everything inward. It turns perception itself into something unstable. It makes you question what you're seeing, what you're hearing, and eventually, what you're feeling. So if at any point while watching Annihilation, you felt that quiet discomfort, that creeping sense that something wasn't right, but you couldn't explain why, you can even leave a comment with the word shimmer, because that's exactly the space where this story exists. And the strange part is, all of this intensity, all of this ambiguity, all of this psychological weight didn't just challenge the people inside the film. It created a completely different kind of problem. Once the film was finished and had to face the outside world, and that's when everything that made this film unique suddenly became a problem. Because once Annihilation was finally complete, it had to face something far more rigid than creative experimentation, the expectations of the industry. And the reaction wasn't what you might expect from a high-concept, sci-fi production with a strong cast and a visionary director. Instead of excitement, there was hesitation. Instead of confidence, there was concern. Executives watched the final cut and saw something they couldn't easily categorize. It wasn't a conventional sci-fi film. It wasn't structured like a mainstream thriller. It didn't hold the audience's hand, didn't explain its rules, didn't resolve its mysteries in a satisfying, marketable way. And in an environment driven by clarity and accessibility, that kind of ambiguity is often seen as a risk. There were conversations, real ones, about changing the film, making it more understandable, adjusting character elements to make them more relatable in a traditional sense. Even subtle shifts that could guide the audience toward a clearer interpretation. But here's where things get interesting. Alex Garland didn't want to dilute what the film was. Because the confusion, the discomfort, the lack of resolution, that wasn't a flaw. That was the experience. And when that vision didn't align with what the studio believed would perform well, a compromise was made, but not the kind you usually see. Instead of reshaping the film itself, they reshaped how it would be released. In the United States, it got a theatrical run. But internationally, it was handed over to Netflix, almost like the film was being quietly redirected away from the pressures of the global box office. Think about that. A film this ambitious, this visually striking, this psychologically layered, and yet there was uncertainty about whether audiences would even accept it. Not because it wasn't good, but because it didn't behave the way films are expected to behave. And maybe that's the most fascinating part of this entire story. The same qualities that made Annihilation so unsettling, so immersive, so different, are exactly what made it difficult to package, to sell, to distribute. It's like the film itself resisted being contained, even outside its own narrative. But here's where it takes one final turn. Because when something doesn't fit neatly into expectations, it doesn't just disappear. It finds a different path. Over time, the film began to grow in a completely different way. Discussions, theories, interpretations. People trying to process what they experienced, not just what they watched. It didn't explode overnight. It lingered. It spread quietly, like something being absorbed rather than consumed. And maybe that's the real legacy of Annihilation. Not a film you simply watch and move on from, but something that stays with you, shifts inside you, reveals different layers depending on who you are when you encounter it. So now, I'm curious, when you think about everything we've explored here, you can leave a comment with a simple phrase, "I felt it." Because more than understanding, that's what this film was always about.